For this assignment, I chose to interview my dad, Bill Denny.
Hi.
So, Dad, when you think about the life you have lived so far in Chicago, what word or symbol comes to mind?
Great. It was a great city to live in. What symbol? To me, the sports teams, everything, yeah. But it was growing up in Chicago, I always felt it was a good time. I enjoyed it.
Where in Chicago were you born?
I was born on the east side of Chicago. Initially, we lived at 67th and Prairie. That was the, I forget the exact hospital. My mother, if she was alive, she'd tell me. But it was on the east side of Chicago was where I was born.
Where in Chicago, what neighborhood did you grow up?
Well, growing up in Chicago, you're known by, you didn't give a boundary, you gave the Catholic parish that you grew up in. And that's how you referred to where you lived. When we lived on the east side of Chicago, I grew up in St. Leo's, which was around 79th and Halsted. We lived there until about 65, when it really wasn't that safe to live there anymore. My parents at that time moved, and we bought a home in Marquette Park, which was St. Rita's. So that's, I grew up actually, like I said, it's in St. Leo's, but then later on in St. Rita's.
What grammar school did you attend?
When we lived over in St. Leo's area, I was in St. Leo's Grammar School for a short period of time. I had a bad accident with my hand, and I had to be taken out of the school, and I ended up going to Gresham Elementary, which was on Green Street, about 83rd and Green. When we moved out of St. Leo's area and into Marquette Park, I went to Marquette Elementary.
How badly did messing up your hand affect your schooling?
I was out of school I fell with a Coke bottle and I severed my right hand about 3/4 of the way off. I was in surgery for like 12 hours for them to repair my hand. Thank God I lost no use of my hand, but with the rehab and everything else, I was out of school for a little over a year, about a year, maybe a year and a half. It set me back.
So what do you have to do differently as opposed to not going to school? How'd you learn the material that you were required to learn?
I was held back. I was out of school for about a year. That hurt, you know. I'm not in favor of anybody holding a child back. But in my case, I had no other choice. That's why they really didn't have homeschooling back then. But my mother tried her best, but like I said, I was held back about a year because of the hand.
Didn't you mention to me once that there was a neighbor who lived by you that would help you?
Oh, that was later on when I went to Brother Rice. At Brother Rice, I did excellent. I had no problem except for geometry. And I swear that brother, him and I didn't see eye to eye. And thank God my next door neighbor was phenomenal when it came to math, and he helped me quite a bit with that.
So is Brother Rice where you went to high school?
Yeah. Like I said, I grew up in Marquette Park, and my father said, what high school do you want to go to? And all my friends were going to either Gage Park or Lindblom or Harper. So I told my dad, I said, send me to Gage. And my dad said, no, you're going to go to a good high school. Well, St. Leo's was out of the question because it was not in the greatest of neighborhoods, and I was active in sports. And if I missed the bus to go home, I'd be on my own. And so my dad said, okay, you're going to Brother Rice. And my dad had connections with the Irish Christian Brothers, and he made a phone call, and next thing I knew, I was in Brother Rice.
Who did you reside with? What family members lived with you growing up?
There was my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my older brother and sister, My dad's mother came to live with us, and shortly after she came to live with us, her sister, my Aunt Mary, due to health reasons, had to come live with us. So we had my grandma, we had a lot of people. We lived in apartments for the good amount until we moved to Marquette Park, where my parents bought a home. Even when they bought the home in Marquette Park, they had to get a big size home to give everybody enough room.
Did you attend church, and what parish did you belong to?
I jokingly say my mother was the original Catholic. When God created people, my mom was the first Catholic. Yeah, there was no, you went to church on Sunday or else. When we were over on near 79th and Halsted, we went to St. Leo's for church. When we moved into Marquette Park, which was St. Rita's, I went to St. Rita's for church. And one thing that I had a joke about, I worked for Club El Bianco in high school, which was on 63rd near California. And the owner, Henry Bianco, when we come into work on Sunday, he'd look at us and go, "Bus," meaning bus boy, "did you go to church this morning?" Well, unless you wanted the owner of the restaurant giving you a lot of static, "Yes, sir, I was at 10 o'clock mass." "Well, I was there too, and I didn't see you." "Now, well, I was at the back of the church, sir." So, yeah, we went to church. It was mandatory.
Did your ancestors hail from Chicago?
Yeah. I take a lot of pride in that. My grandmother, my father's mother, was one of the. She was a women's suffragette movement. She was key in getting back years ago. Women didn't have the right to be on a jury. Juries were made up of all men. And my grandmother fought to get women the right to serve on jury duty, to serve on juries. It was instrumental back then. My great-grandfather, he was turn of the century Chicago PD, police department. He was the shift commander on the Iroquois Theater disaster and also on the Eastland boating disaster. My family has a lot of history in Chicago, and yeah, there are, all of them born and raised in Chicago.
Didn't you tell me at one point that one of your great-grandfathers locked up Al Capone?
Yeah, that was Grandpa Verhoeven, who was the one I just described. His last assignment before he took retirement, he was lockup keeper at Kensington Police Station. And Capone was brought in numerous times, but it was almost like the cell door was almost like a revolving door, because Capone's lawyers, the minute Capone stepped into the cell, his lawyers were right there to, bond him out. And my grandmother told me that my grandfather locked Capone up, and as he was locking him up, my grandfather said, "Capone, don't you give me any static." And Al Capone said, "Officer, trust me, I won't give you any problems." My grandfather also told me back then, Capone, my dad grew up in St. Columbanus, and Capone would walk into the school with a stack of tickets to a ball game, to a Sox game, and tell the nuns, "Take the kids to a ball game." He, as much as he was a very bad individual, he did take care of the people in the communities.
What nationality were your ancestors from Chicago, and where did they live?
I take pride. I say I'm Irish, but I'm corrected by everybody because I'm predominantly Irish with some German and some English in me. My mother grew up in St. Joachim's Parish, which was over east. My father grew up in St. Columbanus.
Did you go downtown much?
As a child, yeah. My grandmother, the woman I described a little while ago, she'd take us, if you agreed to go downtown to St. Peter's Church to go to Mass with her, she'd take us out to lunch. She'd take us shopping. So, yeah, you gave up an hour at church, but then the rest of the time you had a blast. So, yeah, we'd go downtown a lot. That's why to this day, with, you know, you, Mem, and I love taking a ride down, not driving, taking a ride down on the train, you know, getting off, walking around downtown. We'll go, you know, your aunt, my older sister, has her gift shops downtown. We'll stop and see her. We might go to Italian Village for lunch or dinner. I do like going downtown. Not living down there, but going down once in a while.
What is your best memory about growing up in Chicago?
This is going to sound stupid. The one that sticks out the most in my mind was the snowfall of '67.